Okay, everyone. So this next session is looking at movement, competency, development. So our first speaker is Andy Bruce. Andy's athletic development coach and PE and psychology teacher at Merchant Taylors School. He also leads the UKCA Special Interest Group for S&C. He's got a range of degrees education in biology, psychology, sport and exercise psychology, and some certificates in nutrition and eating disorders. This talk will outline, some of the processes and challenges involved in developing and integrating a movement-based curriculum back into physical education in the independent school that Andy's worked. So, Andy, over to you.
Okay, well, first of all, thank you very much for being invited. This conference last year was fantastic, and I can only share the sort of my agreement and resonance with the collaborative sentiment of that's required, I think, to sort of move the profession forward, whatever profession we might be talking about, that is. As sort of Kev suggested there in my very brief biography, I sort of share that identity crisis. I've been through many different roles. My first degree was in marine biology, because I like the sea and I like biology, and that was pretty much the end of it in terms of the decision. I worked in consultancy for a while, actually just about a mile down the road was my first job in the Arndale Centre. Became somewhat disillusioned with that. And the reason I sort of tell you all these stories is because it provides a context for the process that I've gone through whilst I've been at school. I'm an old boy of Merchant Taylors as well, so there's a deep sense of, I suppose, loyalty and part of being a bigger process and a bigger thing involved there, and that's something that I think is quite rare in certain schools. My background is in psychology as well. More recently, that's how I ended up teaching psychology. I've probably done most jobs at school. I started as an independent contractor doing about 4 to 6 hours a week of S&C, as these things tend to start just with the sports scholars. That grew and developed up to sort of 20, 30 hours a week, at which point the school realised they couldn't afford to pay for just an independent contractor to do that, so I moved on to support staff, working 4 days a week. Because I was only working 4 days a week, they needed a psychology teacher, they knew I'd done some psychology, asked me to do that. And so I've been very immersed in the process of the school, and I think that is a requirement in making an impact within the school environment as well. So I'm going to talk to you from a sort of a macro level of how we set up the programme at Merchant Taylors. There's no right or wrong. I'm going to sort of leave all the sort of measurement stuff and the definitions, which I think will wind Kev up a little bit, of definitions of what's athletic development, what's S&C. This is just how I've sort of job crafted since I've been at the school and what we've ended up with. I'm happy to share a sort of warts and all, very honest and open approach to what it looks like. Any questions, please feel free to throw them at me as we go, or I'm very happy to chat. And I'm also very happy to share any of the resources we have available for anything I'm talking about today. So this looks great because you do it in lockdown, away from the actual cauldron of the school. This is our sort of mission statement, vision for core PE. We have core PE and academic PE at the school. Our core PE is also called health and wellbeing sometimes. So empowering yourself with the knowledge, skills and confidence to support lifelong health, physicality and happiness. And there's a very process-based approach to it, hopefully, we're building and supporting. The next slide, really, I think you've probably seen it before. I think it might have even been at the conference last year. Again, I stole this. I don't really have an original thought in my presentation, but this was from Mark de Stacqua, and it's, I think, a picture of a school playground, the late 1800s, somewhere in America. It's, if nothing else, it's just a fun image. It looks like someone's falling to their doom on the left-hand side of the screen. I think they're on a swing. If they're on a swing, I don't know how they got onto it. I don't know how they're going to get down from the top. But it sort of encapsulates the idea of a playground. I think that better conceptualises what physical development or movement literacy development could look like in a school. I don't really like, this is just me personally speaking, I don't really like the pyramids we see of the foundation development performance sort of thing. They're simple, they have a purpose, but I don't know why we're making things that has just one very pointy end for not very many people. The pupils I see at the school come from a variety of different positions, a variety of different levels of ability, and they're all, as has sort of been discussed and mentioned before, they're all on their very own individual journeys. And so if we can conceptualise movement literacy within the school as a playground for individuals to interact with in their own way, developing and fostering autonomy, competence and relatedness, we're going to hope to develop self-determined behaviour, I believe, And I think we've seen that through the programme we've started to develop at school over the last few years. Again, please feel free to steal this one, it always goes down quite well. So this is roughly what a year might look like at school within core PE. Our entire curriculum is broken down to locomotion, manipulation and stabilisation skills. We have a swimming component, which is just inherited there. That's one of the life skills we sort of developed. And there is this behavioural thread that obviously runs through it. Autumn, spring and summer terms. We perform physical testing at the start, the end of the year, from year 7 through to year 11. There's no PE beyond year 11 at school. And we measure growth and maturation. My background, again, as I mentioned before, a bit of eating disorders. Please don't weigh children in front of anyone else. If you've never come across a pupil with an eating disorder, it's because you don't know about it. You will have pupils with eating disorders in school, but a surefire way to set that off is weighing them in front of their peers and leaving the results up to interpretation. We measure their height, it's slightly different, and we can get growth rates from that as well. How much we use maturation is a different topic entirely, but we measure their height, standing broad jump to get sort of lower body power and strength, 1600 run for cardiovascular fitness and pull-ups. We don't just send them out there and beast them. It's an educational process, hopefully, where we describe and talk to them about what they're going through and developing their relationship with some of the uncomfortable aspects of our relationships with physical activity. Sometimes, if I'm being honest, that growth and maturation measure point in the middle probably gets missed out. We have a lot of data, and my next step will be to start to do a little bit more with that data and tying in with what Sue talks about. Schools are absolutely rich with the data they hold, and they're not very good at doing much with it. So just to break down a little bit more, these are some of the slides that we give to our PE teachers and use in the sort of pack of resources that we use. Gives you some focus points that hopefully keeps it quite simple. The range column here is again pretty much stolen from sort of Gainspeed, Ian Jeffries. We try to sort of break it down into sort of a movement menu when we're teaching locomotion skills, and there's a broad amount of autonomy for the staff to be able to deliver or teach a lesson that they see fit with locomotion. If they have skill set in the area, they can take it where they want to, but there are also sort of lesson plans broken down individually for them to be able to use. And we gamify lessons, and we have some very good PE teachers at school, and there's a broad range of how well these sorts of resources are used. Again, so for stabilisation, I'll talk to you about it a little bit later in the presentation, but we've now introduced a resistance training block, which is actually really good. This was something that was very difficult, I think, for people to teach unless they had a good understanding of sort of a different range of exercises. It's probably one of the more foreign ideas for PE teachers using stabilisation and manipulation. Again, the movement menu here has just been stolen from various talks I've been to and various resources I've looked at over the years. I'll try and dig them out for you as we go. And of course, swimming is one of the things that's stayed in our curriculum throughout. I think is really important, something that COVID has absolutely destroyed. We have children who literally cannot swim a width of the pool now, unfortunately. And it is a life skill, and so I think it's valid that we keep it within the core PE programme. I'll show you a bit more what it looks like across the year in a moment. We use an ordinal scale to very loosely measure their performance across this. It's not something that we necessarily will consistently use in every single lesson, but it gives us sort of a bit more of a consistent framework. We do tend to score the swimming at the start and the end of each term. And there are pros and cons to be able to use an ordinal scale in this sort of manner, but it kind of gives a little bit more specificity to what we're looking at. And of course, one of the best things I think of physical education in school is it helps you to teach all these transferable skills like discipline. Our sort of baseline we're looking for there is a 3 on this scale, whereas I suppose if every pupil left the school on a 2 here, able to execute tasks proficiently, although demonstrate difficulty and inconsistency of patterns as difficulty increases, I'd be pretty happy if I was honest. Whereas here, expectation is that they're punctual and correct hit. There are loads of challenges with how PE is timetabled across the school, especially at years 10 and 11. We see them every other week, and that might be a set every other week, or sometimes we're lucky enough to get them for just one half of one term, and then we don't see them for the other half of the term when they do PSHE. I think seeing them all in consecutive weeks is probably better for establishing behavioural standards. It's an absolute nightmare when we see them every other week. it's very difficult to track a half-year group when one person hasn't brought kit for a certain reason, turned up late, to try to remind them by the time, and again, once you're into the summer term, you might only see people twice before the end, if you're lucky. This is just, I don't know if this will work, this is again just another sort of conceptualization. I use a lot of mind maps to get my ideas down on paper. And again, I'll share any of these mind maps that anybody would like to see to sort of demonstrate these. Again, it's just how, again, I think this is going to be an initiation, transition, and actualization movements. So for the sort of more athletic pupils, we can start to bring together these sort of training standards, and we can feed this into our academic PE as well. I think this should move down eventually. So again, our stabilisation skills, and just a very simple way in which we kind of give a rubric essentially to our teachers to work from sort of the ground up in terms of core stability, breathing and balance, resisting and producing force, and again, the manipulation skills. This is where our PE teachers feel most at home, I think, really, especially in the cricket season. You give manipulation lessons to a cricket teacher, it's all going to be throwing and striking. But I'm not sure. I think that's better, at least giving them the framework behind it, as opposed to it just being a cricket lesson. So this is, sorry, there's a lot on this slide. This is what this year of PE will look like for all of our pupils from year 7 through to year 11. As you can see down here, you lose year 11 when they go off on their exams. Our 4th form, actually we lose them from a bit higher up, our 4th form decide to switch over to our year 11 timetable for some reason that makes, I don't really know why. We tend to get a decent block of swimming in the spring term. The thing I'm most proud of that we've started this year is we have a resistance training block for every single pupil in the school from year 7 up. So we're now, hopefully, fingers crossed, getting a bigger gym that will be completed in September. Myself or the other athletic development coach at the school have put together a nice program of activities that really progresses people through learning the basic movements, squat, hinge, push, pull. So every single pupil from year 7 upwards will get access to learn how to use a gym properly. Because if we don't tell them, they'll go somewhere else and find out, hopefully, maybe perhaps a less useful way. Getting this down on paper is cathartic for me, in the sense that it helps me to understand there is so much going on within a school environment, careers days, outdoor education days that just pop up. So trying to map it all out is really important, because it gives you that broader overview. So in years 7 and 8, they'll get about 30 PE lessons a year. In year 9, they get 24 lessons a year. And years 10 and 11, they'll pretty much get 12. Okay, so you're talking about 100 lessons from the time they come to the school to the time they leave, if they turn up to every single lesson. And this is changing in the next couple of years. We're moving to an 11 plus only admissions school, and to move games, because we currently do whole school games after school on a Monday and during lessons on a Wednesday. We're probably going to lose year 10 and 11 PE, and they're going to try and cut year 9 PE, but we're fighting very hard to keep it. So a lot of managing up to be done in short order. That's roughly what it looks like in terms of the amount of time spent on movement-based activities, on swimming and resistance training during their time on a given year. That's a very rough approximation. It's quite a reflective process putting this together. That looks quite good to me, I think. It's a nice balance. But there are, by the time they come to years 10 and 11, there's quite a lot of autonomy in the process. We give them choice of what they want to do. I hate to say it, but sometimes, if you've got a half-year group of people and they're about to go on their GCSEs, playing football is not a bad option, even though we don't have football at school, because they will run around a hell of a lot more than they would otherwise do with a less well-prepared lesson. This is some of the testing data. Apologies, there's no chart title. We test pull-ups, running 1,600 metres, just because it's simple, it's 4 laps of the track, and the standing broad jumps across all years. And of course you can see, hopefully, running times come down, standing broad jumps increase, and this isn't control for maturation at all here, and pull-up performance increases. You do get a very, very broad range in performance across a year group, and again, this is why I think you have to have a more consolidated and simple and robust program that people can kind of take from it what they want, as opposed to trying to individualize too much. And of course you get part of the stuff that Sue was talking about there, bringing all this data together. You'll see pupils there in year 11 being able to do 25 pull-ups. that person managed 25 pull-ups in year 11, he's gone to Oxford to do medicine, and he plays for Oxford, and has already got a blue in his first year. So there are correlations here, it just needs to be unpicked, I believe. So this is probably the most important slide, I've not left much time for it, but this is not what it looked like, okay, in terms of the progress between when we started to introduce this program in the school and where we finished. It looks obviously a lot more like this. There's lots of issues with staff bar, and I'll be completely honest. If you've got a PE teacher that's been at the school for several years and you're going in and saying, hey, let's do this instead, you've got to go about that in the right way. I say no one likes to feel stupid. There's a lot to learn from very, very good PE teachers, but if you come in a confrontational manner, you're not going to get very far. Staff change as well, so you can introduce these programs. They've seen many iterations of different people coming in trying to make money out of independent schools and build and develop new PE programs before, and sometimes good staff leave as well, so it works both ways. There are other priorities in the independent sector as well, definitely. Again, I'm obviously very much speaking about the independent school sector, but most of the PE teachers in the department are assistant heads of middle school, they're tutors, they are heads of sport, they're directors of sport. They have other things to do other than try to adopt and learn this whole new suite of skills and curriculum they're going to deploy. Again, resources, we are moving from a whole school games to a timetable games situation with maybe 9 PE teachers. Many other schools have many, many more PE teachers to be able to run that. We rely on our academic staff as well at times to be able to integrate this into the games programme. COVID, well, that ruined everything for everyone. Admissions, as I mentioned before, we're going to an 11 plus only entry, which has huge implications for not only timetabling, but what the core PE programme looks like if we're going to lose years 9, potentially 10 and 11 from the programme. And stakeholder engagement, this is talking about sort of managing up. I was very lucky with the Director of Sport when I arrived, gave me more or less full autonomy. I started with a pilot, we did one form group and took them through a term of basically locomotion and manipulation skills. And they love it because actually what happens is you can progress and you can regress activities, you can deliver autonomy to pupils, and they're far, far more engaged. Of course, if everyone's ever seen a PE lesson at school and they're playing football, there's a couple of kids that just stand around the goal and they don't really want to do anything, they don't really want to touch the ball. But if you're doing an acceleration lesson and they're peer-to-peer coaching and it's appropriately scaffolded for them, then the least athletic and the most athletic kid will get something out of that lesson. So, what are some of the solutions to this very, very messy situation we find ourselves in? Well, consistency is one of them. Just turning up for the last 8 years and being there all the time, I think makes a really, really big difference. And we're not, trying to impart the message that it doesn't, simple doesn't necessarily mean easy, but it can be very, very effective just doing the basics and getting the basics right first. Team teaching has been by far the most effective way at deploying this new curriculum. We have classes probably up to 20 pupils. We're lucky that that's as large as they pretty much get. But if I'm working alongside a PE teacher or a graduate who is perhaps less experienced in athletic development, I can go, well, I'll take the warm-up or I'll just take this little section. Do you want to create a game for this part of it? That's a far, far less confrontational way than spending time putting together a pack of resources saying, read this and go and teach it tomorrow. Okay? First thing, they might look at it in 30 seconds, but they definitely don't read it after that point in time and it just sits in a dusty drawer on a file on someone's computer. Getting on the ground and teaching with them, people steal. I've seen things that I've done or another teacher has done at the start of the week, and it's like a contagion. It ends up in another lesson later in the week, and then it's in somebody else's lesson at the end of the week. So it can transfer between the teachers with team teaching, and I think that's really important. I think it's something I'd really like to hold on to as we move forwards. Language has to be consistent. We're introducing psychological skills or mental skills. We've got a sports psychologist working with us now, so that when we're on the games pitch or when we're in PE, when we're talking about resilience, we're all talking about the same thing. And when we're talking about mental toughness or grit, we're talking about the same thing. People, the big one in schools is well-being. No one knows what well-being is. No one, when two people are talking about it, they're not talking about the same thing. We've measured well-being at school, and guess what happens? When they turn up in year 7, they're happy as a sandboy, and by the time they're in year 13, they're freaking out about their exams and their well-being has gone down. And we've longitudinally measured that across all year groups, and that can be quite empowering. And that brings me to one of my last points there, really, is data collection. Schools are an absolute goldmine for data, and I'm a bit of a geek on this sort of stuff. I work hard on my data management skills. And I'm really looking to start to bring together all of the academic data the school has, all of the wellbeing data the school has, all of the attendance records that the school has, and all of the physical testing scores that we have, to try to build a bit more of a picture that hopefully is quite empowering. You've got to be adaptable. My goodness, you have to be adaptable in terms of just responding to the curveballs that come your way. It can change day by day, moment by moment. That's part of why it's so much fun. And of course, patience. This didn't happen overnight. This started with one class, and we now have had entire cohorts of 900 pupils move through this over a period of time. In terms of its principle, I think it's better than what we had. It's better than just badminton to tennis to bowls or bocce or whatever the next fad is going to be. I'm confident that it works. I can't stand in front of you necessarily and say we've measured it, but the pupils enjoy it. We survey them at the end of each term on Microsoft Forms anonymously in their classes, asking them, do they feel like they have been empowered in terms of knowledge, skills and confidence? Moving back to our vision and our mission at the start. And it's generally resoundingly positive. So that was kind of an explosion from my brain very quickly of stuff that's gone over the last 8 years. Hopefully it will stimulate some thought in some of you, some questions. It might give you some ideas of what you definitely don't want to do, if nothing else. But thank you very much for listening, and yeah, happy to chat and share with any resources we have available tomorrow morning if you'd like, on anything we do at PE in school.
We'll just have 5 minutes questions with Andy before we start with Tom, so open to the floor, yeah.
How did you go about developing conceptual piracy with this
Across the department?
Yeah.
Again, I think the team teaching is the thing that works the best. Just getting down and actually doing it and saying, like, to start with, I'll take this lesson with, this is how we'll do it, and getting a chance to speak to them beforehand. What didn't work is whole department CPD. We had departmentally protected time, whether we actually all end up in that protected time, sitting around at the same time and listening to it. Like, a PE teacher would far prefer to just do a bit of just teach and get on with the lesson and learn as they go along, in my experience. Creating a nice resource book, which I'm happy to share with anyone, that just sits in people's folders. They might look at it once. A graduate might use it a bit more consistently because they're trying to learn at different stages, but it comes across as quite confrontational if you're presenting a new way of ethos and a new way of doing things. So I've reinvented, and actually Tom shared the movement for sport play kit with us last year, and I integrated that into our OneNote, putting some in the stabilisation game section, some in the manipulation section. As anyone's guess who's read it, actually, as fantastic as those drills are, if I actually go through a game or the T game with one of my other staff members, they'll take it if they want to, and it's far less confrontational. So use mind maps a lot as well. So it is all there for them on paper, but actually just walking them through it, I think, is probably the most effective way I found.
Yeah.
Yeah, just quickly, what did you use the data for? So 1600 metres, the pull-ups and standing broad jump, obviously, I know from a point of view why those tests are done and what the testing, but then what do you do with that data? So if the kid was running 1600 metres X amount of time and then the year after it dropped, was there interventions? What was the purpose of it?
Great question. And this is like how do you use data? So you can use it to sort of reference and set expectations in the class. If you've got a group of year 7s, I might say, okay, we're looking to get round without walking to start with. If you're a fantastic runner, you might be getting around in under 7 minutes. So you can set expectations quite clearly with that. It's more for their development path. We recorded this, I put it into a web application called Sarah that I developed over lockdown with a colleague. And so people can go on and see all of their testing scores the entire time they've been at school and see how they're progressing. And very much the message is, are you improving? We highlight the importance of cardiovascular health, why it's helping you recover from injuries faster, improves your well-being, helps concentration. So it's not like here's yours, you failed. It can be used, and I think the purpose is a bit more higher order. You can bring it together again and manage up with SLT. When we get there and how effectively we do that is another question. In swimming, if someone is very clearly struggling, I used to swim a fair bit, and swimming is dreadful unless you do it all the time. And so if people really can't swim, we will use the CPOMs as school safeguarding software. We'll put something in there, say that we really would recommend you try and get little Timmy to get some swimming lessons outside of school because it is a life skill. It's not a hard and fast, sorry, only 6:30 for the mile today, put you in dummy set B or whatever. It's not doing that close.
Yeah, never at the front. Yeah.
What do you find is the best way to tackle the staff buy-in, especially when PE teachers' workloads are stretched more than ever?
Yeah, it's really challenging. I think, so this year, we've created a role, I'm head of core PE this year, whatever that means. And the one thing I tried to do this year was just like make no extra work for anybody and try to make it a little bit easier. So things that I did, like we run circuit-based sessions with half-year groups at year 10 and year 11. Because literally, you see them once every other week. I was like, well, let's just get them moving. Let's try and get them to do some basic movements that are really vaguely sensible. And at least they'll walk out of here having had a bit of a workout for some of them. And if they're a sports scholar and they've got another fixture for a county or whoever the next day, we can send them off and do other things. But I created a rota and made sure that the people who were like, my heads of sport, who had a hell of a lot of safeguarding issues to deal with themselves, weren't teaching that lesson because we don't need 9 teachers to teach 80 kids in a circuit-based session. So trying to take work away from people and do as little as possible. The things I want to work on next are sort of building slow levels of accountability, but making that as automated as possible. It is very difficult, and I appreciate it is pretty much, unfortunately, bottom of most people's priority list. Even though you push someone in the meeting and they'll say, oh yeah, pretty much finished the uniform.
And based on those methods, what have you found the effect of that to be?
A little. It helps a bit. There's definitely need for consistent feedback processes. I think we need to. I want to streamline our academic teaching and our core PE teaching. People see this as the bottom of the pile, but I enjoy core PE teaching more than academic teaching. I hate teaching A-level sports science. I think it's a rubbish curriculum, and I think I'd much rather have a year 7 class running around like a bunch of crazy kids for an hour than be sitting in an A-level classroom with 5 kids. So streamlining that, and therefore you can then start to really say, well, this is a profession, you can get really good at this. You can be our rock star coach in core PE. So yeah, try and make less work and actually make it a bit more of a specialism, I suppose.
Yeah.
You mentioned about the school potentially taking away year 9, but definitely year 10 and year 11 PE. On the other hand, they're going to give you a fantastically shiny gym. Is that a commercial decision, or is that a visual thing for parents coming in, or is it for good for the sports team? Do you understand or know the rationale behind that? Or?
Different rationales, different reasons. I mean, if I understood what the SLT were thinking, I wouldn't be so stressed out most of the time. But the gym is changing because we need to upgrade our facilities generally. And
just a little bit of kind of a...
Well, yeah, that's been. I mean, since I've been at the school, we've been talking about redeveloping gym space.
Okay.
So I've been sitting patiently waiting 8 years. Yeah, and maybe it will happen. Who knows? With fingers crossed. Taking away the core PE is very much because we've shifted games into the timetable. They're like, well, where is that time coming from? And actually, I was quite surprised. I presented on whole school well-being and physical well-being to year group sections of parents for several years, and the person that got me in, the head of well-being at the time, who's now deputy co-curricular, it seemed like there was a misunderstanding of the fact that sports science and PE were even different things, or games and PE were different things. So we have a continual job to educate people. It may seem really obvious when we're preaching to the choir, but they are different things, and they're fundamentally important things for different reasons. And I think that is something you've got to continually do over time, even if you think they know. Do they really know? So that'll be a challenge trying to manage the timetable balancing. But the only thing I can advise, and we've advised the department, is it's happening. How can we make it the best possible? We're probably going to combine the year 9 sports science and our year 9 core PE programs, and streamline pupils depending on their aspirations academically or their needs to develop physically.
Okay, we will hold it there, just in terms of time, but I know Andy will be keen to chat at dinner and follow up as well, Andy, afterwards. Yep. So just a big round of applause for Andy. Okay, next up, I'd like to introduce Dr. Tom van Rossum. Tom's a senior lecturer at Leeds Beckett in physical education. He leads one of our themes in the KPL Centre. Tom specialises in primary, secondary PE with a focus on children's physical well-being. This presentation will show the impact of the MOGBA programme in primary and secondary schools, and some of the research in terms of the implementation of that through a randomised control trial. So I'll pass over to Tom.
Thanks, Kev. Thanks for the introduction. You stole a lot of what I was going to say there. So just to recap Kev's introduction there. So my name's Tom Rossum. I'm a senior lecturer here on our physical education degree, which is a 3-year programme which our students do before going on to do a 1 year's PGCE. We prepare students with theoretical, practical and pedagogical understanding of physical education. Prior to working in academia, which I started in 2015, I've got experience working in primary and secondary schools. Before I delve into my presentation, I've got a bit of a movement challenge for you all. Recognising you've probably been sitting here for an hour and a half now, so everyone just stand up very quickly, so 30 seconds, a bit of a movement challenge. So you haven't got space where you sit and come down to the front. What I'd like you to do, stand on one leg. If you've got an object nearby, you pass an object around your body while standing on one leg. That's easy. Close your eyes. There you go, the opposite way around. I'll hold the object. Okay. I'd like to see that, so you have to pass an object with a partner. So, if you've got an object nearby which you're happy and is safe to throw, could you pass that to a partner? Well, you can open your eyes to this. Okay. Final challenge. I imagine you've always done your dominant leg. Out of preference, can you swap to your non-dominant leg? Ready to do the same challenge. Stay stable and throw an object to a partner. I'm hanging on with that. Brilliant. Thank you very much for that. Take seats again. Sorry. So what I'd like you to think about now, think back to the settings where you work. I know predominantly it might be in schools, primary or secondary schools. Now think of, are all children in your class able to do something like that? If you were to ask a group, whatever age, 5, 6 years old, up to 16 years old, would every single child be able to perform fundamental movement skill, or balanced on one leg, on both legs, out of choice, and then develop that into a complex movement skill? So that's stabilisation, balanced on one leg, and passing and receiving an object at the same time. So what we've done there is develop from fundamental movement skills with stabilisation on one leg into a complex or a combined movement skill. So my work today, I'm going to talk to you about the movement for sport play kit. Those of you with a keen eye will have seen on the programme that it's titled The Impact of MOGBA. Okay? So MOGBA is the name as we gave the resource during its development. So this is a 5-year project we've been working on with the Youth Sport Trust and funded by Nike. MOGBA, when the marketing wizards at Nike decided that MOGBA, which is a movement-oriented games-based assessment, didn't translate very well internationally. So they fell on the Movement for Sport play kit. As it is branded, it's about to be launched. Well, it should have been launched in the spring by the Youth Sport Trust, and I'll talk more about opportunities for you to access the resource at the end of my presentation. So it was funded by Nike, their made-to-play programme for coaches and teachers to use globally. So the resource is translated into 14 languages. I need to say a big thank you to everyone who's contributed to the development of the project at the bottom side here, including Sam, who's in the room today, and also all the schools and children who have participated in the research over the last 2 years around Leeds. I've got a similar bug as what Sue had earlier. I haven't matched Kev's clothing, but I have stolen one of his slides from a presentation we've worked on previously, so I've got to give credit to Kev for this one. So the Movement for Sport play kit came around recognising the national and international concerns around children's fundamental movement skills, or lack of fundamental movement skills. Those of you who work in school, I'm sure you're not immune to this as well. We recognise that children's movement competence is lower this generation than it was the generation before that, and ultimately that generation had poorer movement skills than the generation before that. So we're in a generational decline with children's movement skills getting poorer. Maybe directly or indirectly linked, their physical activity levels are going down, their physical fitness is going down. Recent reports from the Youth Sport Trust show that children are unhealthier and unhappier than at any time in the past. World Health Organization, only 20% of children meet the recommended guidelines of 60 minutes of physical activity a day. So we're recognising there's some big concerns there. So one potential solution, I'm not saying it is the solution, but it's a potential solution to this problem, was the creation of the Movement for Sport Play Kit. So the Play Kit is a resource for teachers and coaches to use with children aged 8 to 12 years old. That's its primary audience, okay, for that age of children. It's made up of 14 games, fun, creative, innovative, progressive games are within the pack. And it's key there as well, they're non-sport specific, but they do link in to the sports within the curriculum and across talent pathways. The activity cards provide information to the coach on how to set up, deliver the activity, how to modify and adapt the activity by changing the space, effort and relationship within those games. And there's also full assessment criteria to enable coaches to look at a whole body perspective of how a child is performing a movement within the game. So it provides authentic assessment opportunities to assess children's fundamental movement skills and complex moving skills. So it's not in an engineered setting like some of the other assessment tools are. We're not assessing a skill in isolation. These skills are observed and assessed within the game. So it's much more authentic in how we're assessing how children perform those movements. So there's 14 games within the Play Kit, and you can use it in a number of different ways. Okay, so the games are built around 3 phases of difficulty. Got phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, colour coordinated as you can see there. So as a teacher or a coach, you might pick up the resource and like, great, we'll start with phase 1, we'll work through those over 6 weeks. Then we'll progress to phase 2, then phase 3. That's brilliant for a school teacher. But if you're working in a sports setting, well, you're thinking, well, all these games might not apply to my sport. So, as Andy was talking about earlier, if you've got a particular focus on stabilisation or stability, as it is within the Play Kit, object control, which is another name for manipulation skills, or locomotion. So you might have a term, a focus on locomotion skills. Brilliant, delve into the Play Kit, just select those games that are suitable for how you want to set up your curriculum for that period of time. Alternatively, you might be a coach in athletics or basketball or hockey. So you could look through the Play Kit and identify the games that are relevant for your sport. And there are modifications that you can do within the games, such as changing the type of ball. So end zone, for example, is throwing a ball. With a partner, you could choose a basketball, you could choose a netball, you could choose a smaller ball for cricket practice, for example, so you can so they're non-sport specific, but you can make the games more specific for your sport setting. So an example of the sequence of activities, here I've drawn out progression of stability. So we've got phase 1 with tea time, which is a brilliant game you could use as a warm-up, really relevant for a wide range of sports or within PE settings. Progress back to end zone 2 and ultimately into end zone 1 through to end zone 2. The later phases of phase 3 have got a greater demand on the perceptual load and how and the complexity of the movement within the game as well. So for each game there's a 2-sided resource card. The card really simply shows how to set up the activity and how to play the activity, including the type of equipment that you need. Because it was designed to be used globally, recognising that in different locations, so it's being used by a coach in Brazil, or in China, or in Australia, access to equipment and facilities might be very different in each of those settings. So all the games are designed to use minimal type of equipment and non-specific equipment. So there, for example, you've got cones, that could be a bib on the floor, it could be like a smaller flat cone. Okay, so you can modify the activity and the equipment used in the activity depending on what you've got in your PE stock. But you don't need to go and purchase a wide range of specific equipment. There's a QR code on the resource card which links into really short videos demonstrating how to set up and play the game in its simplest version. that's an example of tea time. I'm trying to get that sound off. So we've used tea time in pretty much all of our training sessions with teachers and coaches. So I think it's a brilliant activity as a warm-up. I think it's moving in different directions, forward, sideways. You can then develop it. The example here, you could then pair the tees up. So you can introduce a ball, so you can do some shadowing in a pair. You can introduce a ball to pass and get the timing and movement across the tees together. You could use it as a specific warm-up in a game or for a sports session. So tennis, for example, it's like tracking along the baseline, okay, up and down the tee. So you can introduce a racket into that movement as well. So that's the resource. That is the play kit. Up until now, it's been a paper-based resource with all the 14 cards and then the guide for how to change the space-effort relationship, all in the handbook as well. The Youth Sport Trust have just digitised it all, and there is a web-based platform that will be available at some point this year, working with their legal team to get an SLA in place. Okay, there's some contact details at the end if you were interested in trying out the handbook or the web-based platform. You can contact the YST to get access to that. They're really keen to find schools to pilot, or sports organisations to pilot the platform at the end of this year. So we spent 3 years developing MOGBA, or the play kit. We worked with coaches in America to measure the feasibility of coaches using the games within their various sports settings. We had athletics coaches, PE teachers, and football coaches, soccer in America. But we knew then, okay, well, the play kit works in a way that coaches and teachers can use it with the children it was designed for. But we needed some impact. We needed to understand whether the play kit achieved what it was designed to do, which was ultimately to improve children's movement skills. So we designed a randomised control trial, which is the gold standard way in academic research to measure the impact of an intervention. It was going to be a global randomised control trial with 4 sites, here in the UK, in America and Australia, but COVID hit. So it was going to be a 9-week intervention. We got near to the end of that 9 weeks in a few of those sites. Frustratingly enough, in Australia, we got to week 8 and schools closed down. They couldn't finish the intervention and they couldn't do the post-intervention assessment, so it was all wasted. So we felt lucky that in Leeds we were a little bit later to start, so we were able to run the randomised control trial in primary schools over the last 2 years. So the aim of the trial was to look whether the play kit improved children's movement competence, which was the primary outcome of the trial. We then wanted to look at some sort of distal outcomes as well. So did the play kit increase moderate and vigorous physical activity levels across the school week? So we gave children an accelerometer to wear around their waist. They wore that every day during school hours, from when they arrived at school on a Monday morning through to the end of school on a Friday. They didn't take it home, they only wore it during school hours, but they wore it all the way through the school day, not just in PE. We looked to see whether it improved physical fitness. To do that, we measured their standing long jump and their plank. We also did some psychosocial measurements as well. So we looked at whether it improved their self-perceptions of gameplay and their physical self-perceptions. So the study involved 9 primary schools. Someone with knowledge of a randomised control trial would say, why didn't you have 10 schools? So all schools were paired. And one school who was going to be in the control group dropped out at the very last minute. It was too late to replace them. So how a randomised control trial works, we had 10 schools, okay? We split them up into 2 groups. We had the intervention group and the control group. The intervention group contained 5 primary schools who we delivered MOGBA or the play kit to for 9 consecutive weeks. We had students from Leeds Beckett, final year students, going into schools to deliver MOGBA or the play kit for 1 PE lesson a week for 9 consecutive weeks. That was the children's PE lessons for those 9 weeks. Okay, and it was all the games within the play kit that our students delivered to that class. In the control group, no difference, no change. So their PE teacher taught their regular PE curriculum for those 9 weeks. At the end of or prior to the intervention starting, all children from all the 9 schools were brought onto campus. We did the measurements of their physical movement competence. So we used the Dragon Challenge, which Sam's going to give a demonstration of later today. which is a circuit-based assessment of movement skills, which has been validated and tested for reliability with children of a similar age, 9-10 years old. We also measured their physical fitness, and we did the questionnaires for their self-perceptions of game physical competence. We did those on campus too. So we did all that with all 257 children. We had 142 children in the experimental group, the experimental group being the intervention group. The PE lessons range from about 60 to 75 minutes. On average, they were 70 minutes in school. A lot of the schools doubled up their PE lessons for the time of the intervention. Just for logistics, it was easier for our students to go into school 1 day a week as opposed to 2 days a week. And then just to ensure equity of the project overall, those schools in the control group, we did go back just last autumn and delivered the 9-week intervention to the children in the control group. There were year 5 children who were in the intervention, okay, year 5 plus 9 and 10 years old. So what did we find out? So there was a significant change from baseline in movement competence for the intervention group. Brilliant, okay? The play kit achieves its primary focus or primary aim of developing movement competence. You will see there was a small increase in the control group as well. I'd like to think that would happen because they've had 9 weeks of PE in that intervening period. What's going on if there isn't an increase in their movement competence? But that wasn't it was also a significant change, but not as great as the intervention group. Game perceptions, there was also a significant increase from baseline. Physical perception, there was a small increase, not significant from baseline, but there was an increase in their physical self-perceptions as well. But interestingly, we didn't see any change in physical activity. So there was no impact, up or down really, of any great amount in their physical activity levels across the week. So what do we find then? So yeah, the play kit did improve movement competence, which we think is key because that's what the play kit was designed to do. And interestingly, it did it over a 9-week intervention. For an intervention, that's a relatively short amount of time, but we did see a significant change in movement competence over that 9 weeks. Okay? We could also argue as well that our deliveries, even though they were final year students, they weren't PE teachers, they weren't expert coaches. So put the play kit in the hands of someone who really knows those children well, you might see a greater change. Okay? I'm not trying to belittle our students there, but as they're not qualified teachers, they're not expert coaches, so would a qualified teacher be able to pedagogically frame some of the activities? They didn't know those children they were teaching to. Well, they might have done by the end of the 9 weeks, but not instantly. Okay, so could they differentiate the activities from week 1? Probably not. Not until they got to know those children better. Okay. The increase in children's perceptions of their gameplay abilities is really important. So it wasn't necessarily designed to do that, but what we think is really important is that if we can improve movement competence and improve children's perceptions, physical perceptions and their gameplay perceptions, then it links back to the physical literacy message. Children are more confident in themselves. Okay? So that connect, think, feel and move piece that Kev talked about earlier today, we know from the research that children who've got greater perceptions of their movement abilities or their physical perceptions are more likely to be physically active. They're more likely to look for opportunities to be active. We know that with a positive correlation between movement competence and physical activity levels, that mechanism is in place as well. So double whammy, we're improving their actual competence and improving their physical self-perceptions. So with that, we could suggest that children are more likely to engage in physical activity later on in life. What we didn't see though is a change in activity, physical activity in that 9-week period. 9 weeks is a relatively short amount of time. We did see a change in movement competence. There was a real focus in those 14 games on complex movement skills, performing those complex movement skills in different ways. That's all the children had for the 9 weeks. But 9 weeks is a relatively short amount of time to see a change in behaviour. So if we expanded that intervention for 15 weeks across 2 terms or across the whole school year, would that be different? You could hypothesise it would be. Would just that increase in movement competence, would that just need a little bit longer to play through to improve physical activity levels as well? As children are more competent, increased levels of perceptions, is that more likely to influence some of their choices and behaviours around increasing physical activity over time as well. Okay? We can't conclude that with any strength, but we can hypothesise that that's more likely to happen. If you look at the theoretical models of physical activity in relation to movement competence, we can suggest that might happen. So I had this slide in just this week actually. I realised I was going to have a little bit more time for the presentation initially. So this is a secondary school. So those of you who are secondary school based, not just primary school, Mogbert, the play kit was designed for children aged 8 to 12. We did a big piece of work with Kev a couple of years ago and some secondary schools around Leeds where we co-created a curriculum using the play kit to be used in secondary schools. And they used it across Key Stage 3. So years 7, 8 and 9. So Bishop Young Academy. So I've got to recognise Gavin O'Loughlin from Bishop Young Academy, head of PE there. He couldn't make it today, but was happy for me to share a little bit around how they've used it in school. So they really looked a couple of years ago at changing their curriculum offer for PE at Bishop Young. Recognising some of the challenges of Bishop Young in terms of the demographic where they pull through. Children there maybe don't have access to opportunities for sport and physical activity outside of school that other pupils might do in other schools. Some of the children there don't have access to outdoor space at home, so they're particularly coming on the back of COVID, they saw a big decline in children's movement competence and their abilities to access the sports-based curriculum. So working with us and by using the play kit, they looked to change their curriculum for PE over the last few years to make it more holistic and focus more on the physical aspects of PE. So they've really moved away from sports-based curriculum. They've introduced the play kit across years 7, 8 and 9. They use it in a number of different ways. They use it for benchmarking at the start of year 7 with the assessment. So not only are they looking at the fitness aspects, like a long jump or broad jump and a run or the bleep test, as some schools may still be doing, but they actually got data and information on levels of competence of their children as well. So what they've seen over the last couple of years, they've seen an increase in pupil engagement in PE. Children are turning up with kit and wanting to take part in PE. Increased pupil engagement in extracurricular activities. Children are asking for more clubs after school. They're seeing more children attending their after-school sports provision. And outside of school, kids are more motivated to be active. So they did a bit of pupil voice. So Gav did a bit of work talking to the children. And he had a lot more data I could have presented, but I only wanted to do one slide. And there's a huge increase in children wanting to take part in sports outside of school, even though they weren't doing before. I'm not saying they are now doing more sports, but they're more motivated. They want more opportunities. And think about the children who are at Bishop Young, sort of the area of Leeds, East Leeds, Seacroft area. That's huge if those children want to be more active and engage more in sports outside of school. Andy mentioned it before as well about the staff buy-in. It was a significant change for Bishop Young to introduce this. But Gav said it's been fantastic. The staff buy-in has been incredible. Every staff member's got on board with it. Yes, there might have been a shift in how they structured their curriculum offer across the year, but something like the play kit, the cards are there. Your content for your lessons is there. You might need a little bit of planning of how you look at the progressions or the focus on stability, manipulation, locomotion, but they plan that within their curriculum now. So the play kit is a standalone period within their curriculum across years 7, 8 and 9. So they did need some buy-in initially, but the reaction and the response from the pupils has been fantastic. Gav had agency though. He was a head of PE, so he could introduce something like this. In that project we did with Kev a couple of years ago, Move to Sport, we had other PE teachers from across the city who weren't heads of PE. And we had all the teachers back in here, actually, back in this room at the end of the piece of research. She was like, this is fantastic. But she's like, but if I go to my head teacher or my head of PE and want to introduce this, he's going to ask me for impact. What impact will it have on the children? And we haven't got any impact. She's like, I can't just go and introduce this into the curriculum. So I think that managing up is an important message here as well, that if you're aware of things that you think could impact, but it might be a big step away from what you're doing now, think of how you can engage with senior leaders in school. How can you get them to buy in to these things as well? So having a shift from the norm might be quite drastic, but it can be really significant in terms of the impact it has on children and young people you're working with. And that brings me to the end. It's just a final thought for you all, really. Just to think back to the organisation where you work, whether that's independent school, state school, sports organisation, sports coach. What opportunities are there for you to include the play kit or something else that you might hear about today within your organisation? Just to leave you with that to think about. It's not really for input. Any questions?
Yes, we've been using the modular resource with our junior school lessons this year. Looking at a couple of different models and just get your view if we think one's more appropriate. Essentially, we've used the sort of module base, so a series of lessons on manipulation and a series on stabilising. What then others have been doing where we have touched on each within one lesson. And just see if you had any insights to whether one model was potentially more effective than the other.
I think it would depend. I think if you've done some benchmarking at the beginning and you're really maybe recognising that it looks like we've got some gaps here with children with their stability skills, well, that's a real focus on stability skills for that first half term and sort of pick out the games which are focused more on the stability. If you're looking to do it across the whole year, you might again block it and have stability skills focus, object control focus, locomotion focus. I think it would very much depend on the children you're working with and the context of how you're looking to use the play kit. If you're just looking to use the play kit for 6 weeks every academic year, then maybe use the whole range of games and look at the different phases of progression. So sprinklings in phase 1 in the first couple of weeks, move on to phase 2 in the second couple of weeks, and then phase 3 to finish off. And then giving a real breadth to the different movement focus, stability, object control, and locomotor.
So I did have a second, if that's all right. It was just on the Dragon assessment, and I know it might be a question for later this afternoon, but the secondary school that you were talking about, when they did their assessment, is that something they used?
So they didn't use the Dragon Challenge.
Yeah.
They've used MOGBA, or the play kit. So the assessment piece within the play kit allows you to assess within the game.
Right, so they did the challenge.
So, skip back to here. So the tea time, for example, it's nothing new. We didn't recreate the wheel with this. It's run up the tee, side step each way, lunge when you get to the end, and you're lunging in both directions. So the assessment piece within the tea time is the lunge at the end. So how well the child is lunging and pushing off back in the opposite direction. So that's the movement that's being assessed within that game.
Yeah, it was a question more on the practice. I know you said you did it with the primary school children here at the university. It was more a question on the practicalities of delivering something like that within a school setting.
It does work. I mean, we were fortunate that we could have it set up in the sports hall here. You don't need a lot of space. I think you need about, Sam will do a better introduction of it later on today. You need about 12 by 12 metres of space. It's designed to be set up on a badminton court because you can actually use the lines to lay out some of the equipment and it helps with the measurement. But I've done it in a dance studio where there's no lines on the floor, so it can be done anywhere. Ideally, do it on a badminton court. And in terms of the logistics, it's a timed piece assessment. So each child, it takes an average between 2 and 3 minutes for them. So if you're lucky, you could stretch. You'd be lucky to get a class done within an hour. But you can certainly do half the class in an hour if you do it across the week in 2 lessons. Hi.
I was fortunate, I was in Australia, believe it or not, doing the work for Tom and Drew Miller.
Colin, didn't recognise you. How are you doing?
Just came for this, that was all.
You could make it, Drew couldn't.
No. But the logistics piece, it was really interesting because you have to get the kids like 4 at a time almost to get that flow working really well. So we found it worked best where we had a couple on the Dragons Challenge, a couple doing the long jump, the plank, and the psychological test as well, and then we'd rotate them around, and it just made it flow really well. Because keeping the kids on task on the Dragons Challenge and not getting too distracted, and remembering what was going to happen in that was kind of key. So the less that were there, so like a group of 4, like say 2 and 2, swap them around, that really worked quite well.
Cheers, thank you.
We did it the same here. I think we worked that with groups of, because we had a class of 30 come in, we got them into groups of 6, and that worked really well. It helped save time because with the Dragon Challenge there's some procedural elements to that as well. So in terms of giving a demonstration of the circuit before you assess them, and giving the children an opportunity to go around the circuit and practice. So a group of 6 felt like was enough to sort of distribute the time, but also you could make sure they were paying attention within that as well.